Hi, good morning, and welcome to the ZP Developer Zone. So we like to do this Developer Zone once or twice a week, and it's really just answering technical questions that have come in during the week. So I'll jump straight into it. I always want to talk fast because we need plenty to get through. So today's the 25th of February, and as I say, we're just kind of getting through questions from this week. Something that's big at ZP is really sensitive to APIs. So we don't want all this research to really remain within sort of just the scientific literature. We wanted to get it out into actual make products. So a lot of what we do at ZP is helping academia and helping clients get from field to cloud and also from person to cloud. Now what this statement really means is really about putting sensors near, on, or in applications that are useful and getting that data to the cloud, because obviously everyone talks about AI, everyone talks about analytics, everyone talks about big data. But really the question that needs to be answered is, where's that data coming from? And today we'll talk about screen printed electrodes, which will be one of the sources of data. And we'll also talk about wearable potassium sensors, which is another source of data. Next week we will be having a webinar. I wish I'd actually brought one, it's just up on the shelf, but about the Sensi-All platform. So even though one of the questions today is about screen printed electrodes, the end point for screen printed electrodes from ZP is really people getting to market with commercial applications. And so if you're watching this and you come in specifically to talk about screen printed electrodes or understand screen printed electrodes, please come to the webinar on Tuesday. If you're in India, for example, come to the morning session because that will be the best overlap with you. If you're in the USA, come to the afternoon session because that will be the best overlap with you. That said, I'll go forward a little bit quicker. If you're not sure about biosensors or you want to get trained in biosensors, we do hold corporate workshops. If you're not sure about screen printed electrodes and CGMs and IVDs, in vitro diagnostics, we do hold workshops in Norway as well on these topics. So any links that pop up, by the way, I'll also put those links underneath the video as well. So today, the problem we're trying to fix at ZP is that you've got people who want sensors. They could be farmers, they could be clinicians, they could be patients, and you've got people who want to provide technologies to them. They could be academics, research institutes, private companies, startup companies, publicly traded companies. And so at ZP we've put together this whole stack of technologies that when combined can be used in, let's say, lots of sensing applications, from nitrate to potassium to urea, ammonium phosphate, pH, glucose. The list is, I don't want to say endless, but it's pretty long actually. And we call that kind of enablement platform Sensi-All. So even though I'm going to talk about screen printed electrodes today, screen printed electrodes from ZP would actually fit on then to our Sensi-All platform, and that would really help people translate their lab work into products that you can actually give to clients. And the nice thing about the Sensi-All platform is it's also cloud enabled. So actually all the data goes to the cloud, all the raw data. As I say, if you want to see a real live demo of this, we do a demo at the end of every month, but there will be and this, because we're coming to the end of the month, today's the 25th, we are doing, February that is, 2024, we will be doing a webinar on the 27th. Questions this week, somebody wants to do some Raman spectroscopy on a ZP screen printed electrode, and somebody else wants to do some prototyping on a wearable potassium sensor. So I will help with those two things. The Raman analysis of the screen printed electrodes. So they've got a hyper-value carbon electrode from us. I'll say it in a bit, but these are really good screen printed electrodes. The reason being is ZP is the only company that manufactures screen printed electrodes that actually uses those screen printed electrodes in its own products. So we always know that the quality has to be high because we need that quality to be high. Whereas other people are sort of manufacturing screen printed electrodes for their own, just to sell. So it's kind of a bit like Steve Jobs, who's obviously died at this point, but Steve Jobs manufacturing an iPhone but never using it. That's essentially what's happening most of the time. But actually ZP is not the case. We're actually the biggest users of our technology. So they've got what we call the hyper-value carbon electrode, though there's also a 501 version, which is also quite nice for academia because it has this circular electrode, and people like to pipette, and when you pipette a drop, it spreads out in a circular fashion, so people do like these circular electrodes. If you're interested in these hypervalue electrodes, they're here, and if you're interested in the circular electrodes, they're here. Anyway, to their questions. So they've got this sort of neodymium, yttrium, aluminium garnet laser. I must admit, I use lasers. I'm no great expert on lasers, but that said, I will answer their question. So they've got this hypervalue carbon screen printed electrode, which I'm pleased about. They want to characterize it with Raman spectroscopy. They basically want to sort of, it's Fourier transform Raman spectroscopy, and they want to use this this neodymium, yttrium, aluminium garnet laser source as to essentially light up the sample. So my first instinct is, I think people do this quite a bit. So I'm like I said, first disclaimer is I'm not a super expert on this. Not like I've read about it, I've heard about it, but I've never done it. My first case is you'll be okay, but let's talk about this a bit more and why I think you'll be okay. And also, I'm going to say it, and I'll give you an example, is if you're going to do it, you have to start off with a laser on a really low power setting. You have to basically turn it up, because there's a balance between getting enough power of the laser onto the sample to get a strong Raman signal. But in fact, if you turn it up too much, you'll just end up charring or burning the sample. But I'll make the electrode in this case. It's not just a random sample. So I've looked at the wavelength on this, and it's kind of where I was expecting it to be. So it's a kind of a 1000 nanometers, which is 1 micrometer. Understood. And so my first instinct when I'm thinking about this a little bit is that, you're what's called an infrared A sort of source. It's probably worth saying that infrared B, which is a slightly longer wavelength, is actually used a lot in industry for drying things. So if you want to thermally heat something, you want to dry something, people are generally using IRB. So I suspect that lots of times these hypervalue carbon electrodes get used with IRB sources. So you're IRA, so you're a sort of a shorter wavelength, but I don't think you're not so different from what actually would be standardly applied to this. So IRA is you're using it as an analytical source. IRB is used a lot in production for curing, drying, heating. We're not talking about IRC, so I'll ignore it, but I just put it there for clarity. For clarity, I mean, I have thought about the energy on this a bit. I knew that the energy was inversely proportional to the wavelength, so I'm not denying it. So essentially, every sort of I want to call them a photon, even though I know they're infrared. They're not strictly speaking light. It's essentially, if you double the wavelength, you end up halving the energy, let's say, per photon. But I really don't think that's so critical. It's when you change orders of magnitude that things can, start, let's say, significantly changing. But your energy is not so dissimilar to what would be used in traditional manufacturing. So you're essentially an IRA source. IRB is used anyway, and it's quite adjacent to it in terms of wavelengths. And this is what I was looking for, and this is what I found. I mean, I didn't do an exhaustive search, but you asked me a question. As I say, I'm not a great expert on it. My gut feeling was, yeah, this will be fine, because I know it's done quite a bit. But the thing I was thinking about it wasn't the wavelength. It wasn't the energy of each, let's say, infrared photon in this case. It was actually the power. It's just that simple. And they say it in this paper. The excitation was provided by a standard laser. In their case, it was 532 nanometers. And a very low power to avoid heating effects. This is the key bit. You've got a carbon electrode. If you go in, with the wattage on that laser turned right up, you could possibly cut through the material. I don't want to overplay it, but so you've got to turn it. You've got to basically go in there with a very low power setting. And my sort of suggestion is that the wavelengths are fine, but you have to start off with the laser on the lowest possible setting. And I spelled laser wrong there, with an S rather than a Z. But start it off with the lowest power setting. You will get no signal when you do that, but you'll also get no heating. And then just turn it up slowly. If you don't have control on that laser, that you can turn the power up, it's simply not fit for purpose then. It's not what, you can just try turning it on, but don't be surprised if it just comes on with full power and basically blasts the surface. So turn the laser up slowly until you get a Raman signal. Because it's really, what I like about practical science is it's actually a compromise. Because the more power is not necessarily better, because the more power you give it, then possibly you get a stronger Raman signal, but you'll then start to thermally heat the sample and start to char it. So in fact, it's a balance, and I think you have to literally, if you could get real-time Raman and just turn up the power until actually you could kind of get a decent signal, and then visibly inspect the piece to see whether you actually charred or burnt it. I think that's going to be the strategy you have to do. And that now I am delighted, I'm kind of come off the question a bit, but I am delighted that you did get our screen printed electrodes, because these screen printed electrodes, we put so much effort into actually making them good. If somebody wants platinum, we have a platinum version, we have carbon versions, we have gold versions. Just FYI, if you are developing a new assay and you have, at this moment, you're trying to and ah between gold, platinum and carbon, please go for carbon. All electroanalytical work should leave the lab and go into the real world to help real people with real problems. Carbon is the most translatable material when it comes to commercialization. It's just by far the lowest cost. I have done some calculations, and it's like something like 1/28,000th of the price of gold. So if you're trying to make product, or you're trying to do science that you think you want to translate into real products, please, when given the choice, choose carbon. And when given the choice, even if you were using peroxide enzymes, you can use catalytic materials on top of carbon to make it sensitive towards hydrogen peroxide. If you think you need to make self-assembled monolayers, you don't. You can use pyrene NHS coupling chemistry. So honestly, there is always a carbon equivalent or carbon way of doing things that you'd otherwise expect to be platinum or otherwise expect to be gold. These people have wisely got one of our carbon electrodes. So even if they unfortunately destroy one of these, it's not the end of the world. It's going to cost them 1/10 the price as if they destroyed a platinum or gold one. So please choose carbon. We do have all the links to that. And I have a few links to kind of connectors that you might need, or cabling or potentiostats as well. The thing about this carbon electrode, and this is actually on the carbon electrodes that these guys have, is we've really worked on quality. So everything gets checked by voltammetry before it ships. So we go through the run, checking sheet 2, sheet 6, sheet 18, sheet 21. And then we make sure that we understand that the relative standard deviation for the voltammetric peak height is within, is sort of single digits. And it's this single digits that gives us what we call repeatability. So if somebody comes up and does an assay on top of our screen printed electrode, as long as their lab skills are good, the underlying screen printed electrode is repeatable enough that they should be able to get a good assay. And when by a good assay, I mean good signal versus concentration. So if you come to one of our webinars, in fact, this is one of our examples, where we're looking at different concentrations and we're looking at the peak height, and we can see, and it's done in triplicate at each concentration. You can see a really nice tightness in data. By that, I just mean that, for the highest concentration, you can see the three curves, therefore the three peaks, but there's not this large relative standard deviation between all of them. So, and that comes from repeatability of manufacturing, which comes from the fact that ZP is one of the biggest users of our screen printed electrodes. These people are trying to do Raman spectroscopy on our screen printed electrodes, but I can tell them one thing: they have made a good choice in terms of cost. Those are fairly low cost screen printed electrodes, and they're a good choice in terms of we use them a lot. So actually, they're made at quite high manufacturing scale, and therefore they get the good quality. And also, if they do make, it's back to the first point, but if they do make an accident with them, it wasn't the end of the world, because they're not that super expensive. It's probably worth saying that if these people are successful, they can actually then translate their technology onto our Sense It All platform and actually start making a real product from it. And this is I wish I grabbed one. I might just grab one. Give me 5 seconds. Right, I grabbed one. The only reason I'm bringing this up is because I want to say that the screen printed electrode is is the start of the technology stack at Zimmer Peacock. And in fact, what we, because we are actually always envisaging that people will actually end up wanting to commercialize their product and then bring it onto this Sense It All platform, which is what the engineer is holding here. So the Sense It All platform, so they've got those screen printed electrodes which can then be used on this platform, and this platform is cloud enabled. In fact, I've got some of the electrodes here now. They can be put into little bags like this. These little bags have a QR code. If they come to the webinar on Tuesday, they'll understand the significance of these QR codes. The screen printed electrodes, all types that they have there, are sort of along here. So even though we're talking something quite fundamental here about the Raman characterization of screen printed electrodes, by the way, there's a nice feature of this. The manual is so thin because actually this system is so easy for real people. When I mean real people, I mean people not like you and I who may be scientists, but people in the food industry, people in the clinical industries, or the medical industries, I should say, people in the manufacturing industries, people who are not so interested in the electrochemistry of things, but people who are actually who generally just want to get the job done, if I can put it that way. If you want to get a job done, you don't want a big thick manual, and the manual reflects how easy this is to use. Anyway, so these people, they are using one of our hyper-value screen printed electrodes, but that means that they're actually primed to be able to come onto this Sense It All platform and actually take this product to the market. The reason that they can do this as well is because they've chosen the carbon electrode, so therefore it's low cost. And also, it's got a good repeatability about it. So if they develop assays upon it, they will find out that if everything is kept constant, let's say the concentration, the temperatures, the way that they add the sample, their method files, if everything is constant, then they will have a signal versus concentration of that analyte. And the electrode to electrode repeatability is very good, so it won't confuse their signal, so they should end up having quite a good time with it. So the nice thing about this platform that I'm also talking about is it's cloud enabled, and all the data goes to the cloud, and they can then find their data up in the cloud. But at the moment they don't have the platform, they only have the screen printed electrode. But come to the webinar on the 27th of February, come to the one in the morning, it's a good one for you. The one in the afternoon works best for the guys probably in in the USA and places like that, will be best for the afternoon session. So I will go to question number 2 in a minute, but let me say on question number 1, I think that you should have a successful experiment by trying to do Raman spectroscopy on top of those hyper-value carbon electrodes. It's not the wavelength that's the problem. It's not the idea itself that's the problem. The thing that may be the problem is you've got to be able to turn the power down on that laser, and you've got to be able to incrementally increase it so that you can get the Raman signal, but you don't turn it up so much that you get thermal heating. I mean, in the end, infrared is used a lot for heating. So, you can, if you put it on too high a power, you'll heat, you'll melt, you'll char, you'll burn. So be careful. That's my main concern. Otherwise, also come to the webinar on Tuesday. Question number 2 is somebody wants to make a wearable potassium sensor. We do have a bit of a kit for this. So when you look at our potassium sensors, it'll pop up in a minute. You'll notice that they look very similar to our hyper-value carbon electrodes. And so you understand that the biggest user of ZP screen printed electrodes in order to make products for themselves, in order to make other biosensors, is Zimmer & Peacock. This is what embeds the quality within what we make. Anyway, if this person wants to make a wearable biosensor, wearable potassium sensor in this case, they'll need electronics. I will put a link to the electronics. I hope I put it. No, I know what I've done. So they'll need electronics. They'll need the sensors. These are the sensors data. This is for a potassium sensor. It's really good data. It's almost like you sketched it. The data's so good. And that's because we've just put a lot of effort in over the years on potassium sensing. Because it's wearable, this person was going to need what's called a sweat patch. It's all about microfluidics, so I will talk about that in a bit. And they will need test solutions to be able to test this. As I say, actually, I knew what I was going to do. I've put it all together on a page for them. So electronics, potassium sensor, sweat patch, potassium test solution, and here's a link to it. Any links that pop up, I'll also put them underneath the video as well. So I want to say thank you. And I should have finished off with a summary of the 2 questions. But the 2 questions were, Somebody's got some hypervalue carbon electrodes, fantastic. Your laser, your neodymium doped yttrium aluminium argonate laser, I've said argonate, garnet laser rather, should be fine. The wavelength's not what bothers me, it's the power. You have to start off with the power turned right down and just turn it up incrementally. Look at the Raman data, you know, because I understand that basically the Raman data will get better. You'll get better signal to noise as you turn up the laser. I do get that because, you know, essentially the brighter the light, the stronger your Raman spectrum should be. But if you turn it up too much, you may have a temporary good Raman spectrum, but you'll end up destroying the sample. So you've got to be really careful with that power. I did give you a quick reference among the slides this morning, you know, when I found exactly what somebody said, exactly what I was thinking. It's not the wavelength, it's the power that's the problem. And then with regards to that potassium sensor, if you want to make a prototype wearable sensor, you need electronics. I've linked to that. You need sensors. I've linked to that. You need microfluidics for the sweat patch. I've linked to that. And you need test solutions, and I've linked to that as well. So I put all that together for you as well. So if you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out to us as ZP. Otherwise, have a good day. And if you, obviously, this is recorded so you can rewind. And I'll also put all the links underneath the video as well. Okay, thanks very much.